that this meeting has been duly called and the notice of the meeting has been posted in accordance with Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. Today's date is August the 12th. If you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all.
I got a lane.
Keep going somewhere.
Sorry. No, it's good.
Our first item is roll call. Andrew Bisco. Here. Sean Glovier.
Here.
Debbie Villagomez.
Here.
Maria Douglas.
Here.
Felicia Moody.
Here.
Darrell Owens.
Here.
John Clark here. We have a full board. Thank you all for attending. Next item will be public comments on agenda items. Should we grab the paper and see if we got anything? Thank you. We have no one who has signed up for an agenda item, but we do have two individuals who signed up to speak on non-agenda items. And so let me remind you that we try to keep those comments between 3 and 5 minutes. The board can take no action on these items since they're not on the agenda, but we appreciate your comments. So first up on the list, we have Aaron Golden. Right, perfect. Put the mic on, please. Just state your name.
Hi, my name is Erin Golden, and I'm the mother of 2 children in Kennedale ISD. I appreciate board members allowing me to discuss the topic of reinstating a district-wide mask mandate. I am well aware that masks are a contentious issue with strong feelings on both sides. But right now, the COVID community spread risk in Tarrant County is so high that Judge Glenn Whitley has signed a declaration of local disaster due to a public health emergency. Just today, the DFW Hospital Council announced that there are no available pediatric ICU beds left in North Texas. Those against a mask mandate cite individual liberties and resent the perception that they are being told how to parent their children. While I am normally in support of parenting however you see fit, this global pandemic forces us to look beyond individuals and focus instead on widely protecting everyone. Exceptions can be made for children who have doctor's orders stating they cannot safely wear masks, but if the majority wears them, they help protect the small minority who cannot. We all want this school year to proceed as normally as possible without interruptions in instruction. Virtual school was not ideal last year, but it was an important alternative. This year, we have no plan B like virtual learning, so we need to be proactive now rather than reactive later after COVID has already spread in the district. A key component of being proactive and keeping children in school is to require masks. CDC physicians state that COVID spreads primarily through respiratory droplets, and small droplets and the dry particles formed can remain suspended in the air. Mask wearing is an effective intervention to reduce the spread of this infection, especially in enclosed spaces like our classrooms, where if an infected person is present for an extended period, the concentrations of those small droplets and particles can build sufficiently to transmit infections. Aside from vaccines, wearing masks is the best possible way to keep yourself and others safe, especially children under 12 who are not yet eligible for a vaccine. Last year's mitigation measures worked and COVID cases among students remained low. But now COVID cases are surging due to the Delta variant, which according to epidemiologists is 200% more transmissible, meaning one infected person will, on average, infect 6 to 9 other people. The most effective way to halt this spread is to proactively reinstate mask wearing. Despite the governor's executive order, Dallas, Houston, Austin, and Fort Worth, plus 15 other North Texas districts and counting, are mandating masks. Because as the Dallas superintendent stated, Governor Abbott's order does not limit the district's rights as an employer and educational institution to establish reasonable and necessary safety rules for its staff and students. More than 165 physicians with Cook Children's issued a letter to local districts urging them to implement as many safety precautions as possible and stating that they strongly encourage universal masking for students and staff in accordance with CDC and American Academy of Pediatrics recommendations. I implore the board to discuss this issue and vote on it as soon as possible, because this is too important a choice to be ignored or left up to only one person. Reinstating a mask mandate will not be popular with everyone, but you have a moral obligation and the legal authority to follow the experts' recommendations and the proven science to mandate masks and keep everyone in KISD safe. Thank you for your time.
Natalie McKay.
Hello, my name is Natalie McKay, and I have come to speak about mask mandates and voice my concerns over a mask mandate not being in place in our schools, especially at the elementary and intermediate levels where children do not have the opportunity to receive a vaccination. I'm a parent to 3 children in the district, and none of them are old enough to receive a vaccination. I want to praise Kennedale for all of their efforts and protocols that were put into place last year to keep students and staff healthy and safe. Although we decided to remain virtual all year, I could see over Zoom how cautious and diligent teachers and staff were being to protect the health of students. I could also look at the COVID dashboard to make decisions for my students. However, we are not dealing with the same COVID strain as we were last year. The Delta variant has changed the game with how extremely contagious it is. Science has shown that vaccinating gives us the most protection against severe disease and death, but unfortunately, those who are vaccinated can still spread the virus. That is why my family is choosing to follow CDC guidelines, and although my husband and I are vaccinated, we are wearing a mask in public settings. Over 170 Cook Children's physicians have voiced their concerns over the dramatic increase in COVID cases and hospitalizations over the past month. Pediatric ICU bed capacity in the North Texas region is currently running at 100% as of today, with at least 150 pediatric patients on ventilators. Pediatricians are urging cooperation from the public to bring cases and hospitalizations back down to a manageable level where our children can get the care they deserve. This is a quote from Cook Children's Dr. Jason Turk. It is very important that people recognize and understand that we are in a very serious circumstance right now with this variant. We are absolutely inundated right now with not only back to school volume, but also uncharacteristically a lot of sick kids. And I'm working as hard as I ever have. We are definitely seeing greater numbers than we saw in the 2 other surges that we experienced in December and March. But there have been otherwise healthy kids this time with the Delta variant who have been in big trouble and have required hospitalization and support. And that just really wasn't seen nearly as often with the other surges that we saw with other variants. They're also commenting about the severity of the illness that they're seeing in kids, which is qualitatively different than what they had previously seen. Everybody who can be vaccinated needs to be vaccinated, and everyone who is in school, whether you're vaccinated or not, needs to wear the mask. And that way we can hopefully get through this. Dr. Turk is the chair of the Texas Public Health Coalition. We can talk about our opinions, but experts who are working tirelessly are giving us the code red warning. What else could there possibly be to say? Why am I here having to beg for schools to keep my children healthy? At the least, the district needs to contact trace and put the dashboard back up so parents can choose, since choice is so important, to withdraw their children from the district if cases get to a dangerous level. Educators bent over backwards to make it work last year. Let's make sure that was not in vain. Do not put the students' lives over politics. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have a discussion and consider approval of the 2021-2022 Student Code of Conduct. Mr. G?
And this is the updated from last year was the legislative session. All the legislative changes usually come out of that. There are a few more, but the reality is that this is just a formality that we go through to approve the code. The code is basically what we base the handbooks off of.
Are there questions or comments with regard to the proposed student code of conduct?
I had a couple questions. When we talk about the safe and supportive school team, it referenced policies and procedures for those. Where can I find those? When we talked about the safe and supportive school teams, it said that those safe and supportive school teams had policies and procedures.
That would be in the counseling section, Dr. Devlin's.
Okay, counseling, okay. I think also, I mean, this is just something for you guys to look at, but I think on page 7 of 35, it's still listed an old staff person.
I can't hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. On page 7 of 35, I think just a correction is needed because it still lists Mr. Holguin as being over
Okay.
health and safety. So I don't know if we have a new staff member.
We can take that off.
Okay.
Okay. And then page 8 of 35, it said grade penalties for discipline. And I wanted to see, could I get more clarification on when could there be grade penalties for disciplinary issues? That was page 8 of 35.
Grave.
Great.
It
Grade,
says grade penalties as permitted by policy. Am I reading it wrong?
yes.
That's right.
So what would those circumstances be where grade,
I'll have to check into it. I don't know how to see. I'll have an answer right here.
okay,
It is as permitted by policy, so we would look at our grading, district grading policy, and that would drive what we're doing there.
We have our grading guidelines that are mapped out, that's in a grading guideline booklet, so we'll probably tie in with that.
So we can't do anything grade, we wouldn't do anything grade-wise unless it was permitted by that grading policy that's in place.
right. I guess I'm just asking clarification, because I hear what you're saying, there's a procedure in place, but I'm confused, like, grades to me seem to be grades, and conduct is conduct. So what circumstances, the only one I could come up with would be plagiarism. I could see a grade being impacted by a behavior of plagiarism. Other than that, are there other circumstances where grades would be used as a penalty for conduct?
Plagiarism, cheating on tests, honor code, that would be the biggest ones, so.
Okay.
yeah.
Are there other ones, or those are the only ones?
Pretty sure we
Policy
did
does
that-
not
that
permit
done.
us to give a disciplinary action for something like saying, leaving your heading off or doing that incorrectly. Teachers are not permitted to do that, so that, unless it's permitted by the policy, it wouldn't be covered.
Okay, but we're not sure, it makes common sense that plagiarism would be one of them, but we're not really sure how that policy reads for the grades.
He says mapped out in the grading guidelines, I'm sure, so, that are in a separate document from the.
Okay. Because I would, I have it, like
I said, I don't have it in front of me,
I
I don't
know.
know.
I'm sorry.
To sit there and look at it,
I
I
know,
mean,
I'm
if I
sorry.
knew ahead of time, I could have had
Right.
an answer for you.
I'm sorry. I think I sent it over to Mr. President, but I'm sure it's been busy, so I don't think he was able to get it to you. But I did try to send over the questions ahead of time to give you a little heads up. But I would have issue without knowing more specifically, because again, grades are grades, conduct is conduct, other than
Okay. I can-
cheating or
I
plagiarism.
will say that it would be tied with cheating, and grades would be affected because of the cheating
Okay.
or plagiarism.
Okay.
So,
And that would be the totality of how
Yes.
grades and behavior could be tied together. Okay, great. That's all the questions I had for code of conduct.
Any other questions or comments?
I have a question about the student code of conduct, and it's probably in the system and I just couldn't find it. But when we talk about bullying, once it's investigated, there's a process that goes through to investigate the bullying and then okay. all
yes,
right,
very detailed process.
Okay, thank you.
If there's no other comments or questions, this is an action item, so I would entertain a motion with regard to the item 4, the student code of conduct, I'm sorry.
I just have a question again for clarification for
Sure.
you, Mr. President. Given the caveat that we just spoke about, that would be the only case where behavior would be tied to grades, would be cheating and plagiarism, is that sufficient that we've stated that, or does there need to be a motion that that is what that would really be?
I think the conversation is that the policy reflects those would be the only
Okay.
two. So if the policy is different than that, then obviously it's in opposition to what was stated, and we can come back and address
Okay.
it. But that's what's been stated, is that the policy states it would be for those two items.
Perfect, thank you for that clarification.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the 2021, 2022 Student Code of Conduct as presented.
And I'll second.
A motion by Mr. Bisco and seconded by Ms. Douglas.
Mhm.
Any further discussion on this item? Then all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair hears none in opposition, so that motion passes unanimously. We now move to item 5, community stakeholders presentation for future school use realignment.
We are here tonight representing the KISD Future Planning and Development Committee. My name is Taylor Hayes. I am a parent of 2, soon-to-be 3 students in the district.
I'm Advertus McGill. I am, my address, 221 Chapelate in Kennedale. And I have 2 kids within the district. They're in Patterson right now.
And my name is Andrew Malkowski, and I live at 1348 Mountain View Lane, and I have a recent kindergarten who just started today.
So as many of you already know, there was an open forum for all community stakeholders, students, parents, faculty of KISD, with numerous meetings to address an objective. The objective being the state mandate for full-day pre-K, and also to address the future growth estimates within the city, which will impact our schools and the capacity of each center. Also, this is a bonus, not an initial objective, but it was a unanimous vote to create an early education center for pre-K, kinder, and first grade, all within the district. The community meetings, we held 5 meetings, again, open to everyone who was willing and able to join. Every meeting had a different number of attendees. I know I saw many of you there at most, if not all of them. We started through a number of options. Those options continued to grow and then narrowed down to 3 options, being option 3 and option 5.
And the options that we had narrowed down to option 3 specifically, J.A. Arthur Early Childhood Center, pre-K through first grade was on that list. Then the following would be then thereafter would be the Early Childhood Center. Then J.F. Delaney, 2nd and 3rd grade, 4th and 5th grade. R.F. Patterson, 2nd and 3rd grade, 4th and 5th grade, alternatively. So whichever school had 2nd and 3rd grade, the other school would have then 4th and 5th grade. Option 5, on the contrary, had pre-K pre-K through first grade still at Arthur, but then the option then would be 2nd through 5th grade, and 2nd through 5th grade either at Patterson or Delaney, with no movement in option 5, because option 2 then you have to go from one school to the other school within 2 years. And some of the pros for option 3 were as follows: addresses early childhood center, making sure the kids go there, stay together as one student body before moving. But then there were efficient campus utilization, making use of the space, even split on campuses, making sure that the population were evenly distributed. Least amount of modifications, student receive similar instruction, equalize their academic success. Some of the cons that were noted on option 3, I'll state, student moving often between campuses, multiple student drop off, like me, I will be dropping my kids, for instance. Other parents will be dropping their kids depending on the age group, one at Delaney and at Patterson. Difficult vertical alignment, standalone test third grade, so only one place will be, and then testing that third grade exam. Multiple school transition can negatively impact children learning based on the survey, and we'll talk about that later on. Option 5, we'll just give pros and cons real quick. So pros addresses early, same thing as option 3, similar efficient campus utilization, same thing as option 3. Students stay on campus longer though in option 5. Good vertical alignment, solid grade structure for testing, district-wide foundational core. Now, there are only 2 cons noted for option 5. Friendship is developed in pre-K 1, it's actually split from that point on 2 to 5, and instructional coordination between campuses. We'll let Andrew take it from you.
Okay. Just a point of clarification on that, option 3, where one of the cons was that the multiple moves can negatively impact the child learning. That was presented, that information was actually presented to us at that 5th meeting.
Yes.
Where we had, the presenter came through did some research on the fact, and that was what she was able to kind of find, was through the research, that multiple moves can actually negatively impact student learning. So after all of that was done, we whittled it down to those last 2 options. The way that we came up, the district, or the committee presented a survey. The survey was sent out to all interested stakeholders on July 20th, and they were given 6 days to respond. From those results, survey respondents overwhelmingly, they supported option 5. The total results from the survey, we had about 71.32% in favor of option 5. So we're here today to represent the Future Planning and Development Committee, and we are here today to request the board to consider and approve the realignment of existing campuses to be consistent with the citizen-supported option number 5, where J.A. Arthur becomes the early childhood education for pre-K through 1st grade, J.F. Delaney and R.F. Patterson maintain separate elementary schools, being grades 2 through 5.
I would like to thank all of you for being very involved in the process throughout it, and then volunteering to take the lead on pursuing it.
Thank you, guys.
This is not an action item, it was just a presentation. We will have a formal vote on it. The object was to get all the information, so we have as much before the vote as we could. And that brings us to item number 6, recommendations on next steps with Mr. Gabois.
Wow, how'd that happen? Yeah, I just shook it a little bit, right? Yeah. So, let's see here. Board members, Mr. G, I appreciate the opportunity to present to you tonight.
Need my glasses.
It's up here.
You just thought you could do it.
Don't be hateful, hold on.
Thanks.
He's got it all white. Mr. G can't hear and I can't see. That's all you have.
You want to use this one?
Not good.
Quite the pair.
You really went there.
This is not you.
That's not me.
Recommendation from teachers. No need to
That's
call
what
out
they just
names
did.
like that.
Yeah, if I get the number of that
I
bus,
understand
just
the
run by.
I think it's
You're under it.
it's
Yeah, I'm
coming
under
out.
this.
So, while we're getting our technology worked out here, nope.
So this one's not yours?
That's not
Okay.
me.
That's the one I got. So do you have a thumb drive?
You know what? We have the technology
Awesome.
here. Hold on. Give me any thumb drive.
Did you scan it?
So-
Make sure you didn't bring it first.
I just
Moving-
thought I had the right one.
Yeah,
Check around about
I
it.
don't trust it.
moving into this, and hats off to your community members. They were definitely engaged, and some of you guys that attended those meetings know that there was a lot of cussing and discussing going on about the options, and luckily, you guys get to make that vote, and you will in the future. But in advance of that, irrespective of the choice that you make, it would appear that there will need to be some modifications to Arthur to accommodate whichever solution you guys take into account. And so, in visiting with Mr. G and Ms. Mode, what we wanted to do was try to put you in the best posture we could to be prepared to react to that decision. And so I want to just talk through briefly with you what we see as some productive steps in advance of your consideration so that we are ready to respond and keep that August 2022 deadline on our radar. So we're driven through this process by the government code, and oftentimes the superintendent will say, well, let's go out for bids for architects and see what we can find. Well, you can't really do that, but there are reasons that lead us down the path to requiring an architect as part of this process. I think it's been a few years since you guys engaged an architect for any substantial work within the district. The first question is it a public building? And the answer to that is obviously yes. And so you have to take into consideration, is it an educational facility? In this case, of course it is. Are we altering or renovating the building, moving walls substantially within that structure? And of course, our objective and our strategy was to open up some of those classrooms at Arthur and make them much more inviting for the smaller instructional programs. And will the construction exceed $50,000? I'm sorry, but it will. And so we have to be responsive to that. And accordingly, you have to engage an AE team to do the design, to submit the appropriate documents to the state for accessibility review and those types of things, building permits. And so you need to have an architect. Now, as I said, engaging an architect follows under the Professional Procurement Act, which means simply you hire those folks based on demonstrated competence. What does that mean? We've have the luxury or curse in some cases of working with most of the K-12 architects around the state. And there's a couple ways that you can engage that architecture firm. Based on their qualifications and perhaps your experience with the firm in the past, you can simply choose a firm, ask for a fee proposal, negotiate it, and go to work with that firm. My gut tells me, just working with your community members and some of you folks that participated in that process, and just talking with Mr. G over the past many months about the dynamics in Kennedale, I think for your protection and all of ours, frankly, transparency has to be the key element of the process. And so rather than us just pick and choose some folks that we think might be a good fit for Kennedale, I think we need to open this up. Now, I don't mean this negatively, but it's not a huge project, so it's not super sexy. But my guess is there are firms that you've worked with in the past and some in the neighborhood that would love to be a part of your community and serve you, not just for this, but potentially in the future. And so there will be some interest in this. So our recommendation would be to go out for what's called a request for qualifications. We issue an RFQ, we advertise locally. Most of these subscription firms pick those things up, and firms will see that. They'll ask for a statement of qualification. Of course, we'll send it out to folks that we know in the area that we think can do a good job for you, and we'll get as much coverage as we can. And then we'll take those qualifications, review them, rank them, and get to a decision point. But all of this takes time. And so what we've done, just so you'll kind of have an idea of what we're dealing with here, of course our end date is August of next year, so we want to be mindful of that. So assuming you guys informally give us a green light tonight, what my recommendation would be is let's go ahead and issue that request for qualifications. Let's get it out on the street. This costs you nothing. You're making no commitments here. All we're doing is taking some very mechanical steps that have to be taken, but also very productive steps, as I said, to put you guys in the right posture when and if you make the decision to move forward. So if we issue that request for qualifications and we advertise, we expect that will likely take us through the end of the month. That gives folks a couple of weeks to put their packages together. The structure of our request for qualifications follows the AIA, the Architectural Institute of America guidelines for qualifications and things that we look at, experience, the team, similar experience in the area, those types of things, so that we can make the right decision. We've set aside about a week to review those. We've worked with hundreds of school districts, and every district is a little bit different. And so when we get to that point, once we receive them, we would look to garner some feedback from you on how exactly you would want to be a part of that process. Do you want to sit down and review all 40 of them and help us rank them? Or would you be comfortable with us and the administrative team taking that pile, reviewing them based on a specific set of grading criteria, and shortlisting to a group of folks that we might then bring back to you to interview and talk to and see what your feel is on the folks that they present as representatives of their firm to serve your district. So you can see there, we've put a solid 3 weeks in there in terms of review and trying to schedule a time that doesn't consume a regular board meeting, but perhaps set up a workshop where you can take part in the evaluation process as well and help us choose which firm might be the top ranked firm. Once you establish that ranking, what the Procurement Act allows us to do is initiate negotiations with the top ranked firm. If we fail in those negotiations or can't come to terms, then you go to the next ranked firm. So it's a structured process that you engage folks not on price, but on their qualifications and willingness to work for Kennedale. That will allow us to come back, go through some negotiations, and hopefully hit an award in October. I know that sounds like forever from now, but that's the process. And I think what it does is it puts us all in good standing with your community in that we followed a structured process and gone through an arduous task of identifying the best firm that might serve you for this particular project, but maybe projects in the future. Once that's done, we start the design process. I would expect that the design process would be very similar to the process you went to get to the recommendations that were presented to you tonight, in that we would engage the end users of the facility, the folks that are going to be serving these pre-K through first grade kids, get their feedback on what they want that learning environment to be and what enhancements we can offer the students of Kennedale. Have some of your community members involved in sharing their feedback, whether they're parents, business leaders, or just the old guy that went to the school in 1950 and doesn't know what you guys have to deal with now as school board members and administrators. But make it a community process. It's not going to happen in a black hole or in a dark room where we pop up one day and say, hey, here's what we're going to do to Arthur. So we want that process to be engaging. We've set aside about 4 months for construction. Honestly, I think there might be some ways, and Mr. G and I have talked about how there are spaces within Arthur that we can actually get into and start work prior to kids being out of that campus and not impact the educational environment, to get that work done in time for transition by August of 2022. So I wanted to share this with you tonight and share with you again that the process in and of itself is driven by statute. And if we wait until a final decision is made September, October, then you can see how we're trying to condense that time down. You'll see the largest part of my time here is the design, because we feel strongly that it's important that your end users, your community, you as a school board play a part in what Arthur's going to look like when we turn it over to those younger students. And so we want to provide as much time as we can. And so I wanted to share this with you tonight, let you know that we can issue the RFQ, we can get the ball rolling. So when and if you guys are ready to make a decision, we're ready to respond and hit that target for next year. Any questions, comments, thoughts?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm not an architect or anything like that, so when you say you're going to publish the RFQ, how does that work? You do like a media blast, or is it how does that work?
There are mechanisms to broadcast it, but the way it works in the modern age now, certainly the district can put that on their website as an offering. We will advertise in the local papers, which subscription services pick up. and share with all the architects that subscribe to those services. They see that it's out there. There's probably a dozen firms that we would send it to in the area, and frankly, across the state, that I think are size-wise and resource-wise, ready, willing, and able to serve your community. And so we will engage, again, given the size of the project, we want to make sure that we get the right folks for the job. And that approach of advertising locally will typically get a very good response for us.
Okay, thank you.
What would your company's role be in all this? Just,
To the extent that you would like us to assist you through the process, our role is, I've given you guys a budget, and we're pretty particular about sticking with our budgets. Would play the role of administering the design process, overseeing that to stay true to the scope of work. It's easy when you go into a project like this where we know the specific area we're trying to tackle. We're not trying to tackle the two-story building, but as we get into the design, the superintendent always says, you know what, let's just replace the floor tile everywhere, and let's do all the ceiling tile, and we need to repaint the whole school, and before you know it, your $2 million project has your business manager pulling his hair out because now you're at $5.3 million. So managing that scope, and then when we get in there and we start working around those babies and we're actually doing work in the school, we want to look at access, egress, safety, security, and make sure we're not impacting the educational environment in our construction strategy. So we would basically be your eyes and ears on the project during the implementation, and hopefully targeting a slide somewhere in the building. But basically give you the technical backing to make sure your project gets done the way you want it done within the budget that you have and within the time constraints that you're
It's
dealing
been
with.
my experience, it's not the superintendent who tries to do that, it's the architects that start expanding on the project. And
Architects are great at listening to people's wish lists and putting them on paper, and before you know it, everybody thinks that's the way it was supposed to be, and so we try to rein that in. Yes,
And
ma'am.
having said that, is there some benefit to perhaps starting the community input ahead of the selection of the architect? So that we have some community parameter that we've looked at, so the architect comes in and says, I want to sell you the Taj Mahal. I said, well, we don't want the Taj Mahal.
Well, the good news is we already have a narrative program. We've also got a line item budget, and we also have some schematics for Arthur on which walls we're talking about moving and that type of thing. So there are some mechanical, structural, and electrical things that have to be addressed within those buildings. The rest of it's sticks and bricks. It's not super complicated, but what we really want to focus on, and this is where the architect and his team or her team needs to listen to your end users and be a part of that process, is what does the instructional model look like in these classrooms? We talked a lot about hands-on and manipulatives and engaged type learning environments. You've got a staff that's excited about doing that, and so we want to make sure, we don't necessarily want to design the space itself, but we want to make sure you've got power, you've got air, you've got good light, you've got accessibility, you've got all those things. And then there's some things that Mr. G has presented to you, and Dr. Vu has presented, that perhaps your community and parents can take part in constructing some of those environments, because they're going to change. It's not going to be stagnant. It's going to be a dynamic learning environment. Those kids are going to move around, and so we want to make sure that we do engage them, but your design team needs to be part of that process. I would like to, I think you guys, the staff I know has done a good job of working with us to come up with our scope. But putting that on actual paper needs to be a collaborative effort between your staff, community, and the architect team to make sure we're mindful of the scope, the budget, and everything. So,
at this point, could you bring back to my recollection, do the targeted sticks and bricks impact the exterior look of the school?
we didn't really prepare anything to change the curb appeal of the campus, if that's what you're asking. One of the things we did consider in the overall budget, and this is one of those things that we'll talk about, I know the thing I kept hearing from some folks that were not necessarily opposed, but concerned about a transition to Arthur was, how are we gonna get people in and out of that campus, and how are we gonna keep them off the streets? And so one of our scenarios does have a pattern of traffic flow that changes just a little bit, but creates a drive around the back of the campus that gets folks off the streets and provides a controlled transition of traffic through the campus. In doing so, where we take those babies and how we integrate them into the building, we can create some entrance elements, if you will, that draw folks to those spaces. Because I can anticipate largely taking the parents off the front of the school and bringing them in through the back. That's kind of, I'm talking a little bit out of turn, but that was a scenario to get folks off the streets. But no, we didn't do a lot to the curb appeal, if that's what you're asking.
I was gonna say, is that a normal, because I guess I was thinking a lot of the things that were being thrown around with design were kind of, I don't know, I feel like, do we have enough time to leave 5 months for design? Is 4 months for just construction enough time?
Yeah.
It's good, I mean, I'm
Well,
obviously, that is not my.
I'm a little concerned about that as well.
Here's the truth is, it's the nature of the beast. I mean, I can remember back in the late 90s, we had a solid 3.5 months to get in and do work over the summer in campuses. And the state's done such a great job of setting your schedule such that now you're compressed down to about maybe 60, 62 days in there where we truly have a vacant campus we can get in and attack. And so that's why I say that from our perspective, talking with Mr. G and the administrators, I think you have an opportunity at Arthur, because of its current student load and capacity, that we can actually move those students into an area and focus, we can get started early.
That was gonna be my next
Yeah.
question, because I have a child at Arthur, so I was curious. So on here, on your graph, your timeline, it was saying construction won't start till late April. That would only be 1 month of.
Correct.
So will the other things you're saying that needs to happen to the bones of the campus, will that be before construction begins?
In
While
terms
kids
of-
are in school? Like you're saying with electrical, all these things that.
Absolutely.
Are not, okay. So it's
Yeah,
still gonna be, it's just not gonna be like
Walls aren't coming down.
pedal to the metal construction.
We have laid out strategies, for instance, Lockhart High School, we destroyed 2/3 of that high school and added back in twice that much square footage, and 1,200 students never left the campus. So, we did that over, of course, a couple of years. But there were things that we accomplished early on before that allowed us to get some work done and sort of do a musical chair with the kids. But I think you've got the opportunity with Arthur to isolate those students in an instructional environment where they're not impacted by the work
Right.
we're doing over here.
I guess that was my question, so those things, I guess I'm just needing
They're included in
clarification
our
on
strategy.
construction not beginning until April 22nd or whatever it was, the end of April, but things will be happening before, cause I'm like, how is all of this gonna happen?
It can, I mean, we've literally gone in and gutted an elementary to a shell and put it back together in a summer. So it can be done.
But kids will be shifted around and things will start prior to your targeted construction date.
You're absolutely correct.
Okay,
yeah.
that was my
And there is a way to speed up that process that you went through, but that's kind of going outside the scope where that becomes more where you're picking, like you spoke of earlier, that would speed that timeline up.
Yeah, and honestly, I talked earlier about the ranking criteria for the architecture firm. We want a firm that understands maintaining access, egress, safety, security, and all of that has been on an active campus in a comprehensive renovation program. This is not super comprehensive. I don't want to be dismissive. It's certainly complicated, but we're really just talking about taking out some walls and opening up some spaces. And so there's some carpentry, there's some finishes, there's that, and there's some mechanical and electrical work that has to go on. You don't want to hit one switch and turn on the
Yeah.
lights 2 rooms down, so we'll work through those
Well,
scenarios.
you're for sure the expert. Seeing the timeline kind of made me like, whoop, whoop, oh my
Well,
goodness.
and honestly, I kind of wanted to get that reaction from you guys to understand that the quicker we can get somebody on board and be prepared to move forward, the quicker we can initiate that design process and perhaps accelerate that construction start date even earlier than April. So that would be our objective.
He's had his hand up for a while too. I don't know.
So just to add to your point, my son also, I was out there yesterday, or the day before, and they moved their class from one one side of Arthur, school to the other side, I think, because of the project. So
Yeah.
they already moved that class. But it sounds like you guys will not start until April 25th, so I guess maybe
Well-
construction may start before.
There are things we can do before, certainly pre-planning, absolutely. But that'll be answer your question earlier, what exactly do we do? That's a lot of the coordination efforts that we'll take into account early on, working with your campus leadership so that they're aware of the hurdles that we're gonna put before them and they're prepared to manage that accordingly.
Will it be concrete enough information that we can pass to the parents, those campuses that we're likely to start this? We'll move some electrical here
Absolutely.
at this date, we'll move
Yeah.
walls at this date, so they know
Is that the
generally what's happening on the
concern?
campus. around that.
Absolutely. We will have, if there are issues with staging on site for materials and that type of thing, we will assist in preparing notifications for parents, showing them drop-off locations, here's how things are gonna operate now, and that'll be a complete collaborative effort between your administration, your campus administrators, and us as a PM team.
Okay.
Yeah, I think one of the concerns is keeping the students and the construction totally separate.
Absolutely.
Nobody get in there that way, and the safety of them, the kids, some of those kids at Arthur are old enough to walk home. And,
Yeah.
walking through a construction zone or walking through, or trucks and stuff like that.
You think it's hard keeping masks on them, try to keep a hard hat on them. So
Yeah.
we choose not to keep them in the construction zones.
And,
Yeah.
I guess the other part of it is, I just lost train of thought. I guess start shuffling the drop-off points and stuff like that, or are you gonna have the room to put your construction material on campus, or you?
Yes, you have real estate to work with at Arthur. From 30,000 feet, let me just say this, and it goes, I'll use the analogy of the options that were presented to you tonight. Instructionally, we always try to set up a grade tier structure such that students aren't moving every year or 2 years. We do not want to impact the educational environment. So our objective when we sit down and begin this design process, one of the first things we'll do is establish the phasing strategy, so that hopefully, once we set those students in those spaces to allow for the remodel work to take place, that is their home for probably the entire spring semester. We'll try to make that transition before we ever start the work, so that they will be established, comfortable, and they know where they're going to learn, how they're gonna get to the gym, the cafeteria, and everything else, and they won't even know instruction's going on in another part of the building, except for maybe some things that they see on the outside. So we will set that up and try to maintain that with as little change in the environment as we can throughout the process. I know how teachers are, they're creatures of habit, they build their nest and they don't wanna move it. And so we wanna try to set that in place as quickly as we can.
Kids too.
Are you planning any construction after school or at night, that type of thing, or is it just gonna be mostly a day thing?
Yes.
Yes.
We will put in place all the mechanisms we need to make sure we get it done. And so.
One of the things right now that I tell you that we're already doing is we're having to accommodate band. Band requires more space right now than they will in the spring because it's beginning, and so they need them in smaller groups, so they require more area. But as they start coming in the spring, start preparing for concert, they're gonna move back into whole group practice. Well, then those other spaces will be freed up, as he's saying, in the
Mhm.
spring to shift teachers to other areas.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like I said, we've been kind of working through this process. Ms. Clark and Ms. Poor have been working to already start opening up some of those areas and clearing them out, and then we got a plan with band to reshuffle after spring. So.
I think at some time, the design is supposed to start in October, but just like we had the parent meetings at the junior high school, we should go to Arthur and do a tour and say, this wall is gonna come down, this is gonna be, it's gonna look like this. It's been a while since I've been in Arthur, so visually, I can't imagine how it's gonna look, and I know, you guys have a plan, as this is gonna be this, and that's gonna be that, and that's fine, I just wanna see it. And if I wanna see it, I'm sure some of the parents would like to see, just so they can start wrapping their brains around.
In advance
gonna
of that,
happen.
I'm happy to come back to your next meeting and share with you the concepts that we've come up
Okay.
with, so you can at least see the walls that we've highlighted to come down, and the thoughts that we have about, it's more than just taking down a wall. You know, you're talking about a dynamic learning environment, and so where we keep walls, let's say you have a 2 classrooms here, we take down the divider wall. We have 2 classrooms here, we take down the divider wall. So you have 2 large spaces. Our thoughts were, and it was included in our estimate, was to create some windows within those classrooms so teachers can eyeball each other and work together. Part of that reason is, one, that's the way instruction's going, but more importantly, obviously, we don't have restrooms in every classroom like you typically have in a pre-K setting. And so when little Johnny needs to go, you know, to the restroom, in the absence of an aide or something else, you can still have collaborations between the adults so that they can keep an eye on the learning community and not, you know, have any challenges there. So I think there's pluses to the scenario, and we'd be happy to share that with you.
Got the gentleman back there.
Just a real quick question, and you guys may have discussed it. Have we done a cost benefit analysis of rebuilding Arthur versus just buying a little lot and just building, you know, because I don't know how many are we talking about from a forecast perspective, you know?
We have, and that's a great question. One of the scenarios we looked at early on was a new standalone early childhood center.
Yeah.
The blessing that Kennedale has is the real estate to serve the students that they have and still have extra space. And so really what we're doing is we're taking a campus like Arthur that's underutilized to a large degree and has space, and taking advantage of that space, relieving Delaney. So we're sort of doing a musical chair with the students and putting the district, even with the change, in a posture that all campuses then have room to grow. And so we can work within the existing real estate, put the district in a posture to deal with the potential growth that's going to occur in the community and not spend the dollars for a new facility. We had looked at a new standalone pre-K 1 facility. It was about $4 million, not including food services. So, and that would just stretch out the underutilization at all the campuses. So we'd essentially be overbuilding. So the value in taking advantage of Arthur's space long-term plays well for the district.
I mean, you know, overbuilding and modernization too, right?
Absolutely.
Arthur is a
We're gonna clean it up. We're gonna clean it up.
Yeah. Part of it also that those expenses, not including that, is your staff.
Absolutely.
All
Correct.
that kind of stuff. So you would have to have another principal, another assistant principal, you know, the staff to go with it, versus you've already got a building, you already have, you know, that number of principals already.
Administrators, right.
Administrators ready. So it's just one of those things, we think it's a better use of dollars of doing it this way.
Could you remind us what the cost of building a standalone structure was? I'm just curious.
It was $4 million.
4 million,
Mhm.
and this is 2.6?
Correct. But that was $4 million, not counting food service.
Oh, not counting, okay.
Yeah.
You gotta have a
So we'd have to figure out how to do
cafeteria.
that.
Yeah, okay, yeah, now.
Or administrative costs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or operating costs, correct. All right, so if you guys are okay, I'll work with Mr. G. We'll advertise, issue it, and then in the interim, Mr. G can communicate with you on the degree to which you want to be involved in the process once we get those statements of qualifications in. And then we'll structure that review process so that everybody can participate to the degree you guys want to be. All righty? Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 7 is discuss and consider approval to authorize the superintendent to issue the request for qualifications just discussed. This is an action item.
I make a motion for
Jump right to it.
the superintendent to have the authorization to issue the request for qualifications for the architectural design services, for the design services of the district.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Moody and second by Ms. Villagomez. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair hears none. That motion passes unanimously. We now move to item 8, our budget workshop.
You gotta hit the roads.
Okay. Anyone done with sensitive budget, you don't have to.
Hey, thank you guys again for coming in and doing the recommendation. Quick break.
Yeah. Taking a break at 6:57. Get water, restaurant, get water.
Do I need to record that?
Pardon?
Do I need to record that?
No.
Okay.
It's on the record. so-
I'm just asking because there's not anything here.
No, no.
Let's go box for that.
In your packet, I put the notice of the public meeting to discuss the budget and proposed tax rate. It was published yesterday in the commercial recorder. So we have to have a meeting on August the 26th to
Public hearing,
public hearing.
which
and
would
then-
be on our regular board meeting.
Right. Within this document, we're proposing a maintenance tax rate of $1 and 174, and an interest and sinking fund of .2817 for a combined total of 1.2991.
So that's a 4-cent reduction, basically.
Yes, sir. Last year, our tax rate was 133.64.
I think
Okay.
what people need to also understand is that since, for the last 3 years, we have been forced to compress down. We went from a $1.17 tax rate, we're gonna be at $1.02. So that's a 15-cent drop in tax rate.
Mr. Adams?
Yes, ma'am.
This is a workshop, right? So we get to ask questions back and forth?
Sure.
Okay. So, back to the maintenance tax. So you said the maintenance tax, and then you said something else.
The interest and sinking fund?
Interest and
It's
sinking. Where on this piece of paper is that?
right up here at the very top.
I'm not, maintenance tax.
School debt service.
Debt service.
Oh.
It's
Oh, down here.
The second number.
it's got 2 names, interest and sinking and debt service.
Debt service and interest and sinking. That's at
Same-
interest
same thing.
at the bottom. So those are the
But
same.
Right here,
Thank you.
this is the maintenance and operations
Right.
tax rate.
I got that
This
one.
is the debt service, or I call it interest and sinking.
Okay.
I mean, I'll try to use.
I know, because you know.
You get used to certain terms.
Okay.
So, and then we compare last year's budget to this year's budget, and there was a 1.1% increase in the maintenance and operations budget. The debt service, there was a 6.58% increase, for an overall increase of 1.083%.
And a debt service is?
The interest and sinking,
Bonds.
paying the
Interest and
bonds.
sinking, that's the same
Paying
thing.
on the bonds, all of it.
bonds.
That's
Thank
all
you.
those
that's
papers.
your money that's collected to pay off bond debt.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, the total you said was 1.83 or 1.083?
The total
Yes.
is 1.2991.
Right, where is that?
Middle column.
That's way down here at the bottom.
Oh.
That's-
Proposed rate
I think what you were asking about is
Adams?
the total expenditures, which
Yes.
is listed at 1.83% increase.
he-
Right, I think you said 1.083.
I'm
So
sorry.
that's why I wanted to
Oh.
make sure.
Okay.
So this is correct, 1.83, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Sorry. These are the values that we received from the appraisal district back on July the 22nd or 3rd, I forget which day exactly. But you can see last year we had a little over just barely over 2 billion. Now we're at 2.178, 2,178 million. New construction was down quite a bit. A lot of the stuff around Kroger was in the previous year, and we just had a few houses. And some more of that area got added to the tax base. So taxable value went from 1,704,000,000 to 1,821,000,000. So there was a sizable increase, probably on your house.
Yeah.
I know my house went way up. So.
Which is why we have had to compress down to 15 cents.
Taxable value of the new construction is 34 million for last year and just short of 10 million for the current year. This middle section comparison of proposed rates and last year's rates. The one in the middle is the no new tax rate, which is kind of a funky computation, but it's something we have to do. Last year's rate was 1.0547 for maintenance and operations. The interest and sinking was 2,817 for a total of 133.64. The proposed rate is 101.74 and 28.17 for a total of $1.2991. And as you can tell, we're producing about twice as much revenue as what the state's providing for us.
Per student, yeah.
And every time our values go up in our district, the state cuts back their portion. So they're gonna make sure that it balances out and we're not getting any extra revenue off of that.
I mean, Kennedale's a little different because we have such a high tax base for the number of students we have. They're trying to get to 50-50, the state paying half, taxpayers paying half.
Well, that ain't happening.
That's not happening in Kennedale.
State's barely at 40.
Yeah.
Last year, the average market value of a residence was $235,000. This year, it's $248,000. Average taxable value was just short of $200,000. Now it's $212,000. But even though we dropped our tax rate, everybody owes $92.81 more on an average house. But I haven't seen that average house yet, so.
And one thing that I want to make clear is that, you know, we don't affect the values. We simply, and we don't even really affect the rate, because we have to compress it down based off what those values are. So the appraisal district sets the values, and that's what, you know, I think a lot of people have this misconception that my taxes keep going up. Well, it's not us that are making the taxes go up, and I think that's where the misconception comes from our stakeholders, is that the district is always doing this. No, this is from the state and it's from the appraisal district.
Plus, for school districts, the comptroller comes in and audits the values that the appraisal district assigns to us. And if we're not within 5% of what they think it should be, we get penalized. So they try to play the game as well as we do, trying to make sure their value is as close to as they can get it to what is actual. That's the whole truth in taxation, was everybody pays their fair share. Before 1984, it was not uncommon for the tax assessor collector, there was no appraisal district at that point in time, and the tax assessor collector assigned the values. And if you were his friend, your house may be really low, and somebody you didn't like it might be really high. So that's what was created in 1984. Fund balances, this is what we ended last year with. I have to pick a number, and I'm gonna say we're gonna spend exactly what we brought in this year, which is not really the case, but that's where I get those answers. The next page is a budget summary report for Kennedale ISD. This is what our budget broken down by student. but they're really not really good comparisons because our actual budget for 2021 is, we've had several adjustment or amendments that we have approved and added into it. Plus, we have less students last year than I'm projecting for this year, so. They're really not, I mean, they're relatively comparable, but they're not exactly comparable. You're looking at one year versus another year with different budgets, different number of students. So you look it over, and if you have any questions, you can give me a holler, and I can try to explain.
I have one quick question, just looking at it. For 36, co-curricular, extracurricular activities, is that sports and fine arts under there, or what is in that category?
Yes, anything that's basically UIL related. Cheerleading, sports,
Band, competitions, theater.
Okay, so that would be
One
fine arts
play.
and those sports, okay.
Choir, theater,
Drill team.
Archery.
Cheer.
Bass club.
Bass club.
It's a barbecue, team too, isn't it?
We need a barbecue club.
I mean, we do have some outdoor school stuff that does fall in there, so.
Do we have any other line item that shows it's separated sports versus fine arts? Or is it always in this one category together?
One category.
Can you help me with number 23?
Number 23 is school leadership. That's our principal's offices and their staffs.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking, I thought that was student leadership, and I was thinking, boy.
$2 million.
We paid them well.
We're about to get a lot of student council
You're paying them
applications.
more than you're paying us on the board.
That's right. All right, we'll double your salary then.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So back to number 36 again, there's no way to view on here what is sports funded versus fine arts funded, right?
Not on this,
All,
not
there's
on this
another one?
one.
There's another report?
No, I mean, I can pull that data.
Okay. Okay, gotcha, okay,
Athletics has a program intent code of 91,
okay,
and everything else has a 99, so
okay.
I could pull that data, but for this purposes, I have not. I don't have to for
Gotcha.
reporting purposes.
Gotcha.
And sometimes some of our sponsors, we get them in the wrong place, so we spend a lot of time trying to find it and move it to the right spot, so.
Okay.
I have a question regarding number 41.
Yes, sir.
What are we lobbying for? I'm just,
We don't necessarily lobby as a district, but we pay districts, we pay dues to TASA.
TASB.
Yeah.
TASB's our lobby arm technically. They have an arm.
We're really, we have to break it out, and what they give me is if we pay $5,000 to TASB, 8% of it is for lobbying.
This all generated from the legislation where they were upset that school districts were, I guess, fighting legislation in Austin. So they proposed a law that now requires school districts to, and government agencies as well, like the city, to sit there and show in their budget a line item to where you're having to show how much you're spending towards lobbying efforts to affect legislation. What they don't realize is these professional groups basically represent us because we aren't always able to be in Austin for that representation to speak up against what they're proposing. So, you know, that was a way to try to limit school districts and government entities from being able to impact legislation in Austin.
The big issue is they don't want a unified voice of school districts. They want individuals to go down there and try to represent your district, and it's very difficult. You know, and so again, it probably could come up in a special section that's called no taxpayer-funded lobbying. That's directed at school districts who use TASB, it's directed at cities who use, whatever the organization is. So the intent is to keep a unified voice from happening.
Yeah, there was legislation this last time to basically say, we can't do it at all.
Gotcha.
And so,
Okay. I was just curious, it just seemed like a very odd thing to see on the budget.
Well-
And it's the same amount each year, and so I was just curious.
I mean, we belong to the same organizations, and it's about the same
Yep.
percentage every year.
I think another component that people need to be very aware of is that, you know, the charters are able to lobby like crazy, but yet whenever public schools go argue about charters pulling away from public school funds,
Yeah.
that's what they want, that's another area that they want to silence, you know, is our ability to argue against that.
Where do you anticipate the funding for new school modification, where's that gonna fall under the 51? Is it gonna be considered a repair, or is it gonna be considered,
Because that went down, I thought of that too.
I mean, where is that $2 million gonna show up in this?
It'll probably show up in 51, but I may put it over in a capital projects fund, which is 699 versus 199,
Okay,
and that way it doesn't show up here.
well, okay. I'd like
Kinda
to
We're
know.
gonna,
depends
we're
on
gonna
how
talk
we-
about fund balance at the end.
Okay.
So we got some stuff we're gonna go over with fund balance.
I just have one other question about, line item 53. I'm just curious for data processing, why, because that looks like the most significant decrease this year. So what was the difference between last year and this year, and what,
COVID. We spent a
Just
lot
the-
of
the
money
dashboard?
putting into COVID. I mean,
so the tracing and that's what I was wondering, if that was the
well,
significant decrease.
just the fact that we were doing everything
Virtually.
Yeah, we had
Right.
a lot of software, we had some new software licenses we had to buy, and that's turning into like renewals and stuff now, so that could explain some of it. But
Okay.
we did have a lot of, we had to expand some software and things to support one-to-one across all the grades
Right.
last year, because we previously were just 5 through
Right,
12.
intermediate and up, yeah, okay. That's, I figured that's what it was, but I was just wanting the
plus,
clarification.
we've got some potential for some additional federal funding. Is that a good way to put it?
Yeah, we applied for the
We've been,
emergency
we apply for
connectivity fund
everything.
coming in, but, you know, we're also looking at using that to buy more Chromebooks and, continue, like, help reimburse for some hotspots.
Okay.
That's really what those are for. That's all we
Okay.
can use that for.
Okay.
I have one more question.
Yes.
It's probably not on here because of the way it's consolidated, which is fine. But sort of like with number 36, where you said, yes, there's also a 91 versus a 99 code for fine arts and sports that's just not on here.
Well, that's program intent. That's
Yes.
not a function code.
Correct. So do you do the same thing per campus, or is everything in here? So like, pick any one of them. Instructional resources, media services. I see the totals here from last year to this year. Is there someplace else that you're keeping it, how much we spend on instructional resources for the high school, the junior high?
That is librarians, is instructional resources. You're talking about number 12?
Yeah, any one of them. I'm just wondering, is there
Yeah.
another separate
We
thing that you
break,
keep?
we keep it broken down by campus, and by program intent code, especially function 11. It has lots of program intents.
Okay.
You
So
got your
so any
basic.
one of these, really, you have another way of, even if I picked 31, guidance and counseling. I mean, whatever it is, you have another way that you're keeping track by campus as well.
campus, yes.
And then they come to this cumulatively right here.
Right.
Okay.
But again, you can't necessarily equate dollars expended per campus as being a imbalance, because you may have a counselor at campus one that has 10 years' experience in the system, and another counselor that may have 2 years.
Right.
So their rates are gonna be different. So
Right.
again, you can look at it, but I just don't expect that to mean because
Right.
you don't have the same number, it doesn't mean you have the same,
A lot
it's
of
not different.
variables.
Yeah.
I mean,
lot of
high school
variables.
has 2 counselors, junior high has 1, Arthur has 1, Delaney and Patterson each have 1.
And you probably have some positions that are going from one campus to the other,
Mhm.
and their salary is on one campus.
Good point.
You know, you can't even compare like administrative salaries because of the amount of responsibilities at the high school level with administrators compared to an elementary principal's responsibility.
different.
So there's a lot of variables that factor into it.
Yeah, gotcha, okay.
And number of office staff, I mean.
All kinds of things.
The bigger the campus, the more
Right.
staff you have.
Mhm.
Any other questions on that second page? Okay.
Anything else?
Fund
These
budget.
are, the next group of pages, there's 3 of them here. One's the general fund. This is the 2021 budget. In the first column, the proposed 21-22, and the difference, plus or minus. It does balance. We have projected $30,421,746 in revenue and $30,421,746 in expenditures.
Imagine that.
So it was a stretch to get there this year. I think the last time I presented, it was like 250,000 in the hole.
Yeah.
But, we figured out how to move some over to some federal programs, and picked up a little additional federal revenue in the general fund for our SHARS, school, health, and
So basically, being larger and easier to read, this is same thing as this?
yes.
Yes, okay. Thank you for being easier to read.
So that's our general fund. It balances. We'll get into some more stuff later on here, but there's not a whole lot of money for me to move around this year, let's put it that way, for needs as they arise.
So this might be a lengthy answer, and I don't mean it to be, but the teacher salaries, that was a big chunk that we added to the budget. Where did we make that up?
We had over budgeted in a few areas. We have reallocated teachers to some other programs, so.
We did a lot of shifting with personnel
Yeah.
as far as from campus and different positions within the district. So we were able to fill a lot of positions by just shifting and balancing it out more.
Okay.
There, so.
So we didn't really have to do, we didn't really have to go into certain areas and do cuts. We were able to just shift it to the staffing patterns around to make it work.
Balance with the
Yep.
number of students. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're trying to figure out, okay, if we have this many students, we should have this many FTEs. And sometimes we can maybe, Arthur, we might can cut 2 teachers, but we had to add like 2 pre-K teachers.
Mhm.
I mean, we're trying to.
Your grade levels, that's another thing, is you look, grade levels shift in population. You
Right.
know,
Right.
So not all grade levels are the same population.
Right.
So your teachers, you're constantly shifting your teachers to make sure that it balances out.
Yeah, it's just good to hear that we didn't have to go into any particular areas and do any cuts.
No.
We were just able to
No.
shift things around and still
Yes.
come up with those teacher salaries being incorporated. Okay.
I mean, I'm a little concerned that if we do grow much, we may have to add several teachers. And I'm not sure I've got, because we haven't got everybody hired actually for this year. So I've got extra money in certain areas that will maybe need to be reallocated to if we need to hire a teacher.
Gotcha.
So.
And Mr. Bisco can't be crossing guard every morning at Arthur.
If you
We
do
need
it
to
bad,
find
you get
some-
fired like I
got
do.
2 schools, I got Arthur and I got Patterson. And they didn't pay me either.
Pay you in love.
Sort of a related question to that, barring the growth in the students, which we can't predict, right? Who's gonna move into the district? Aside from that, how many staff are we short now in the district?
Which staff?
Any and all?
I'd say roughly probably around 8%,
We're short?
8%.
And how many staff people would that 8% equate to? We still need 20 people to hire, we're looking at 50 to hire, we only have 5 vacancies, what is 8%?
I mean, we're always short custodians.
Okay.
We're always short cafeteria workers. I mean, we were short all last year, we were short the year before that. I mean, we're always
Okay.
short in that aspect of it. We are short some teachers this year, so, you know, but we're working to get
Everyone is.
that finalized and finished up.
They're still
But that's
on.
a universal thing throughout all
Right.
school districts right
Right.
now.
Okay.
Our maintenance, you know, our maintenance crew, we stay fairly, I think we have one position in our maintenance.
Okay.
Cafeteria and custodial, right now, paras. Paras is the area where it's very, very difficult to keep paras. And, I know of other districts that struggle to keep paras as well.
Okay.
So that's just part of the game that
I
we
mean,
play.
every day, anytime we hire somebody, it has to come through me to put the coding in for where I want the salaries to go. And today I did 7 different
Okay. So it's about
positions
an
that got-
8% vacancy, but we're not sure what numbers that is exactly.
Depends on the area, so, I mean.
Okay.
Oh, that's
Okay,
Good.
that's nice, that's good.
What
Yeah.
campuses are those?
Excellent.
Yeah.
Junior high is,
What campus?
are they both junior? Yeah.
I mean, the thing we have to watch is, again, we had a 1.1% increase in cost, operational cost. We gave our teachers and staff, say, 2%, that's 70% of our budget. You know, if we get to that 1% increase in revenue for next year, it's gonna be real hard to struggle and not pay an increase. I mean, because that's what you gotta watch. If our property values don't allow us to have 1.3, 1.5%, because, again, if you take our budget and multiply 70% of it as salaries, we're gonna have a hard time paying them 2%. So, I mean, we have no control of what that property value goes to, but if it goes the other direction, you know, our efforts to continue to pay teachers and, you know, give them bonuses, not bonuses, but compensate them and pay them an increase in salary for their work, it's gonna, you know, you may have to say this person goes to give everybody else something.
And this is where the calculating the compensation package and trying to bring that out ahead of time when you don't have finalized numbers is where there's a delay, because, you know, it's really hard to sit there and say, we're gonna be able to give X amount of dollars or X percentage of raise to staff this year, when we don't even know what our finalized values are gonna be, because those don't come out until July 20-something, so.
And every day, the value changes.
Mr. Adams, the decrease from the state, that's because of attendance, yes?
You have to know the former.
No, it's because our property values went up,
Okay,
that's why we bring in less state revenue.
okay.
As was said, the state taketh away,
Yeah.
so, you know, because we're getting it from our taxpayers, they're gonna take it away from us on the other end.
Go look back 6 or 7 years, the state paid almost 45%. They've been going down every year in terms of the percentage of the
I
overall
think they're,
cost.
what, if they're 38% is what they're at,
Okay.
roughly?
Or statewide, yes.
Used to be 50-50. It used to be, that was the budget was 50-50.
Or that was the legislature's intent.
I don't think
But
the
every
trend's
year,
gonna stop either.
the state pockets about $3 billion that they've allocated for education because of property value increases. You ask a legislature about that, and they'll say, no, that doesn't happen, but it does.
It all goes into the general fund and then they spend it back out.
Exactly.
And whenever we ask about the rainy day fund and them tapping into the rainy
it's
day
not rainy.
fund,
It's not
they
rainy
don't,
at all.
then they start mentioning, well, you have your fund balances, tap into those. Well, our fund balances are like our savings accounts that, for emergencies that we can't predict for. You know, when we have 40-something AC units go out, you know, and you gotta replace those. if you don't have your fund balance, then you're scrambling, then you're having to take out loans to sit there and pay for those things. So, you know, them saying that take it from your own fund balances and quit mentioning the rainy day fund, whenever there, as he's saying,
Yeah.
they're building that rainy day fund every year off of the property taxes that we should be getting in the first place.
I'm just saying, I drove down to San Antonio over the summer, and there are signs, there are billboards for people running for public office that say, abolish property tax. So some of the stuff that we're seeing, it's not.
I saw that
You
sign
saw that?
yesterday.
Yeah. And I've heard some people say it, and I'm like, it's not gonna be good. So all this that we're talking about here, it's only actually gonna get worse. So that's why
Yeah.
I'm kinda getting at it.
Huffines,
Well, you
that
know,
was
and
his
my
sign
thing is,
yesterday, I
they
saw.
pit us against our own stakeholders.
Yeah.
In essence, that's what they do. They pit us against our own stakeholders because property taxes are a very important thing to stakeholders. And, you know, people don't want to pay more taxes. I get it. I'm a taxpayer too. I don't want to necessarily, but, you know, they make it out like, you know, we are the ones, but it's not us. We're not controlling this. That it all comes from the state, so. Okay.
Well, I mean, if the state wants to pay for all of it and do away with property taxes, just for Kennedale purposes, you know, we're talking $17 million
Yeah.
that they've got to come up with. And we're little.
Add in the really big districts and how much that is, so. We'll move on to the next one.
Yep. We
Child
have
nutrition.
child nutrition budget. This is our lunchroom program. It's balanced. We are down and we cut some costs that we thought we could do, and, because our revenue was gonna be down some. Talking to Ms. Tomlinson, we have 5 that we are contracting with a service company because we can't hire food service workers. Somebody else is hiring them and we're having to pay them to, but if we like them and they stay with us for 90 days, then we can make them our employees, so.
And I think everything in this account is generated through child nutrition. And so it
Yes.
is completely separate from the general fund. So when I got here, our child nutrition fund balance was pretty healthy. And then COVID hit and that fund balance went down. But you have to realize that our cafeteria workers are paid out of this fund.
Yep.
It's not included with our other employees. And that, whenever we had them working overtime and doing the meals during the spring, that took a big chunk of the fund balance.
So how long before the fund balance is exhausted if we're losing $165,000 a year?
Well, that's just the decrease.
Between year to year, I
Year to
understand.
year.
But you can't lose money
We're
every year.
down to about $150,000 now in fund balance and food service. When I got here, we were right at $500,000.
Mhm. And do we expect the federal extra kick in to continue into next year?
Yes. But our biggest issue is supplies, getting them here.
That's,
I mean, the farmers are still producing everything that they're producing. They
Supply
can't
chain.
truck it in. There's
Supply
no truck
chain.
drivers to deliver it, so,
there are literally shortages everywhere.
yeah.
So,
And this decrease from the state is the same reason as the property taxes for the fund?
No.
Fund
Child
services?
nutrition.
No.
You're
On
talking about
child
child
nutrition.
For, yeah, nutrition is,
Well, last year, we didn't know that everything was gonna be free,
okay,
so we had built in
gotcha,
kids paying.
okay.
We've taken most of that out. We left in what kids will pay for extra stuff,
Okay,
potato chips, stuff like that.
Ice cream.
yeah.
Ice cream.
reiterate.
No, and
The
there's-
adults don't get to eat free.
Right.
So, but we don't have a lot of adults eating with us.
And correct me, but property taxes don't factor in this. This is federal, a lot of this is federal monies that come from the federal government and from the state. You know, there's a lot of hoops with this, in this area. So.
Okay,
I
I
think
was
I've
just
got
wondering,
some
because the
holes.
other one was the taxes, so I just figured If it's a decrease and it's the state, if they were doing the same thing. but-
This is your income tax
Oh.
thing.
Yeah, I may have some holes in my understanding of where the revenue comes from for the child nutrition budget. Can you give me
The first line is
down.
what the kids pay, or the adults pay. That's local revenue. It's also got interest income, and then we get some rebates from time to time. There's a little bit of miscellaneous income. The second line, the $6,500, it originally started out that the state paid us so much per every carton of milk we sold. That's where it all started, but it's kind of evolved, and they just give us a little dab of state money. The biggest item, of course, is the federal reimbursement. We get about a little over $5 for a breakfast and a lunch for every kid that eats. So,
And that's for every child or just the ones that qualify for?
well, under COVID, everybody eats for free right now.
So it's every child now. It wasn't
No.
every child. It was only the ones that qualified.
We got about $5 for free. It's about $3 for reduced, because they're still paying some. And for kids that paid, we got like a quarter.
So is there any way for us to, in a perfect year, is there anything that we can do to impact those numbers?
The thing that impacts it the most is our à la carte sales.
Right.
Okay.
That's where we make our profit, is,
So if you buy Twinkie for 10 cents and sell it for $1, we can make some money.
yeah.
But that's on the local line, all of
Yes.
that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can change the Fed.
I mean, we've cut that way back to, I mean, if a kid wants to eat 2 lunches, they get 1 free, they gotta pay for the other one. I mean, there's certain rules that come into play there.
So we can't like invite Chick-fil-A in to put in they pay for sponsorship and all sorts of stuff.
Not
You
at-
can, but I don't know how much profit you're gonna make off it.
Yeah,
Not at-
that's-
you're charging what, $3 for a lunch? You're not gonna get much Chick-fil-A. Yeah.
You know, there are, well, let me back up. I know there are school districts that they have, it's like you want being on a college campus, you know, it's like,
Like a
they got all
food-
that.
like a food
But they don't
store.
take, they don't take federal monies in order to do that, you know? So they're losing all that federal money, because if you are bringing in the federal monies and receiving the federal monies, you have certain nutritional guidelines and everything that you have to follow. Those companies aren't following nutritional guidelines, so if you're gonna receive those, the big money, then you're gonna give it up to bring them in. Did I say that accurately?
Lunch is not a moneymaker. It's kind of like concession stands.
Most school districts, they pay for this out of their fund balance. You're hitting it out of your general fund. It's coming out of there.
General fund is reimbursing food service to make it balance.
You know, this is where I will brag on Ms. Humiston. She does a great job. If she finds ways, she scraps and she goes and gets surplus from other districts, and she's done a great job. She built that fund balance up to, you know, where it was in good shape. COVID just threw a wrinkle in everything. So we were looking at doing some improvements to our cafeterias based off that fund balance, and now, as he said, we don't have that luxury right now, so. Any other questions there? We're ready to move to the next one. Okay.
The next one is debt service or interest and sinking.
Thank you.
Whichever one you like, the terminology.
It's bond debt.
It's bonded
So
indebtedness.
thinking because we're seeking? Buying.
The page, the long page behind it, that's all of our debt. So, of course, most of it is property taxes. The state does give us a little bit of money. It goes back several years to when we changed the homestead exemption from 10,000 to 25,000. The state kicked in some money, so that's basically what the 83,000 is. And I don't know what that number is really for this year, but it's less than last year, so that's why I picked 83. Our regular payment, if we weren't calling any bonds or paying them off early, the principal would be 2,610,000. But because I've maintained the debt service rate at 0.2817 since I've been here, we're able to call $1,455,000 worth of debt for this next year, or in February.
Put that into perspective, whenever I got in the district, our bond indebtedness was 30 million, and we are currently at 23.
So,
Okay, Mr. Adams, on this chart, where are you? I know the principal is the first one, and then we're going across to, you said where we're calling the
He's on this one.
calling the, yes, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought we were still on this long one.
That's-
Okay, where are you
this
then?
just breaks up,
That's all.
the first two columns are, first three columns are a total.
Okay,
Add up all the other columns.
That's the debt.
got you. So we finished with this one, and now we're on this one.
And that one actually,
Can you,
this one's connected.
we just go through that one real quick and kind of just
Okay.
break it? I mean, basically, it's the year the bond came out, and then the payments.
Whenever it was refinanced, most of our bonds, the last one that was issued was in 2004. But you don't see any 2004s on there.
Right, that's why I'm trying to find out where you are. Okay,
The 99 series was, I don't know what we built in 99, but that is a capital appreciation bond. It's non-callable. We just have to pay it off as it matures. The 2006 is the same thing. It's a capital appreciation bond. That's the one that drives me nuts. There's like $25 worth of principal.
thank you.
$2 million,
Drives him nuts.
But look how much interest we're gonna pay on that $25.
Oh.
And you're saying those can't be paid off early?
They're non-callable.
We're paying two,
We didn't pay interest, very much interest up at the first of this bond. The way they had to structure it to stay under the 50-cent cap. So,
okay, so, what year did you say we did this?
well, this was 2006.
So in 2006, the principal was rounded up to $25.
No,
No.
I mean, if you take this on back up here to 2006, we were probably paying some principal, some interest. But then the way they structured the debt, there was a big payment there in 2027.
So I hate this word, but it feels like a reverse of a amortization. You guys know where I'm going with this. Feels like the reverse of that.
Reverse
Is
mortgage.
that?
Reverse mortgage, that's what it is.
I just absolutely hate that word. It's the worst. So, okay.
I mean, it's the way.
That's the way they structure.
Leander was the capital appreciation. They were having to build buildings so fast that they could not make their bonds work with the values that they were getting to keep them below the 50-cent cap. For interest sinking fund has a 50-cent cap. It's the highest it can be. Or we're at 28.17, 50 cents is the maximum we can go. But to make the debt, make the buildings happen, you ended up with things like this, where you were paying principal upfront, but at the end, you were having to pay all the interest on this deal.
Even though you paid off the principal.
Even though you paid off the principal the way,
Yeah.
I mean,
With all that being said and done, we are scheduled, if we stay to the schedule that we're on, to be debt-free by 2027.
That would be nice.
unless y'all decide to bond collection.
And buildings meetings and stuff like that?
But the good news about if we do something like that, because I've left the debt service or INS tax rate at 2817, you can see we're paying $1.5 million. So that would make a big dent in
Building.
future bond issues. We wouldn't necessarily have to go up on the tax rate. But we
We'll
would
make a
still
lot of
be
people.
making bond payments past 2031.
Unless inflation drives everything up and you don't want to pay it off any sooner.
Any further questions there? Okay. So now the next thing, is I asked Mr. Adams to put this together for us, and it's basically kind of going through our fund balance changes. Since we've come into the district, the things that we have addressed, you know, I gave y'all in your packets for the orientation, kind of where we were with our strategic, when we did our strategic planning and needs assessments, we looked at certain things, and then where we are addressing those, and then what's still coming. Well, as we are looking at moving down the road with strategic planning and looking at, you know, what are we gonna do with Arthur and how are we gonna pay for it, and, you know, all these other projects, you know, we do still have some roofs on our other 3 campuses that need to be addressed, so there are just more things that are, you know, it's never ending, they're always gonna be coming with these projects, so how do we find a way to sit there and take care of those and pay for them, but what have we also already addressed? So, do you want to go through it, or you want me to go through it?
You can.
All right, so I'm gonna, well, you put it together, so I want to make sure I'm doing it right.
I'll watch you.
All right, and I'll have my glasses for a second.
Try mine?
So yeah, I'm good. I just had to find the right spacing to put it at here, so I have, not only can I not hear, but I can't see without. All right, so in September of 2018, this was right before I got here. I came in December of 2018. We had a fund balance of $10,831,866. I can't, they're blurring, so I can't tell exactly what that is. All right. Our revenues to expenditures were roughly 29 million to 27 million. So we had a surplus at the end of that budget cycle, and that money was then put into fund balance, or rolled over from the general fund into the fund balance. Okay, so everybody following along there? All right. So pick up with the next, the budget amendments for 215,000. You're gonna have to refresh me on what that was the curriculum for the pre-K, or for kinder, first grade,
K through
second grade.
6.
Okay. Basically, we bought, it's called Heinemann Products, but this was basically our
Fontes
guided
and
reading, Fontes and Pinnell. Okay. We also bought Letterland phonics program, because when I came into the district, we didn't have a uniform phonics program, consistent phonics program, so we bought Letterland for our teachers because it was scripted. And you've heard me talk numerous times that to me, one of the fallacies in education is that we assume that teachers come out of college prepared to teach reading, and they're not. And so now we have the reading academies, we have other things that we've been doing, but it was a scripted program to help our teachers with the phonics, and then our guided reading program as well. So we put an investment right off the bat into upgrading that curriculum, okay, those resources. And then we went to, you see the excess revenues or expenditures, that went into fund balance. So at the end of 9/19, so in 1 year, the fund balance went to 12,800,000. Yeah, I can't read, 12,800, sorry, I'm just gonna read the first 3. Roughly 12,800.
Okay.
The next year, the revenues were 29, the expenditures were 31, so obviously we expended more than we brought in that year. And that was because that's when we tackled the roof projects, okay? And you'll see that accounted for later on. But so we were in a deficit right there at the end of the year because we pulled out of our fund balance to tackle the 3 roofs at Delaney, Arthur, and CSS, which were in bad shape. So then that year, we went to budget amendments for our HVAC control system, which was the ideal impact for $518,000. Now, that was one of those things like, is it gonna be worth it? Yes, it's been worth it. So Ms. Mode is shaking her head. Mr. Adams is shaking his head. We are pulling in about 100,000 in savings off of that program each year. So, and the intent with that was to sit there and put it back into a plan to replace aging AC units. And how many AC units have we replaced thus far?
I think we're right at 44 units in the last, I guess it's been 2 years now, we've replaced 44 units. Of course, 22 of them were when we did the roofing projects, 11
Yeah.
at each campus, for CSS and for Arthur, a portion of Arthur, we still have issues at Arthur.
And we still have a lot that have the R22 refrigerant in them that are very old, and that's not even done anymore. So as they cycle out, we're going to sit there and be replacing them with more updated units. We also are looking at, as we start replacing, possibly looking at some air filtration systems on those units as we start moving forward. So these are all things that are working, but, you know, we put one thing in place to sit there and start benefiting in another area, and that's basically the savings from the controlled systems. And I know the controlled systems aren't always popular with staff, you know, but that controlled system savings, you know,
It's working.
it's working, so.
Except for the teachers.
All right, the next thing is that basically we have the PAC upgrades. That was $250,000. We actually ended up spending $265 for upgrades, and I think it was lighting with the LED lighting. You've seen the benefits of that. Our performances, everybody, you know, so that was a significant impact going back into our fine arts area. Then on the AV Pro, the PA system, this was a security issue. A lot of our schools, our cafeteria workers in certain parts of our schools were not hearing when we had drills, we're not hearing when we had lockdowns, they weren't getting the communications. So fixing that was a security thing, and that ended up being $49,000, so right at $50,000. And a lot of that was at the junior high school. Then, of course, we did the upgrades to everything in here with the technology so that we can, you know, have better presentations and people out there can see what we're talking about when we're looking at things as well. So those upgrades were $43,000. The roof replacements at the 3 campuses we mentioned, you see the amounts there. Environmental systems, there's the 11 AC units that she was talking about, the CSS building, and the 11 air units at Arthur Intermediate. So as they were addressing the roofs, we also addressed the air units on those campuses. Then the E-rate project was approved for $224,000, and if you're familiar with E-rates, basically we pay 40% and we receive 60% in federal monies to sit there and address technology issues in our district. So it was a win-win for us. We were gonna have to expend basically 40%, but we were gonna get 60% reimbursed, basically, or actually upfront. We were gonna have to.
Yeah, that's right, and that's based on our free and reduced account.
Okay. The problem is that project has been delayed because of COVID and because of backlogs and everything else. So that project has been kicked from year to year, so you're gonna see it recurring for the next couple of years because of the timelines and basically, it's not us, it's the E-rate fundings. That other 60% has not come in yet, okay?
Brian tells me it's gonna happen this fall.
Yes, it's supposed to be happening soon. And that's a lot of the cabling, the
It was
switches.
the cables, right?
This
Huh?
is cable,
Yeah,
this is
that's
strictly.
Cabling,
This is
switches,
cables, and the next year will be
servers.
switches, like you're
Yeah.
saying. and-
Okay.
Yeah.
And that was all, you know, positioning us to be good for another 25 years with our infrastructure, with our technology.
Yeah, for the cables, the switches last like 5. So, yeah.
So as you can see, we addressed quite a few things that year, okay? So what's the 4 million?
The total budget.
4 million, 3 million, Jimmy, what's that?
4 million is the total of all the budget amendments, and the 3,897,000 is actually what we spent.
Actually, okay, all right. So you see in that year, we took quite a bit out of our fund balance. to address some things. Okay. So then that dropped us back down. Well, we had excess expenditures over revenues once again, so we put 2 million back into fund balance off of the
Took it out.
previous budget.
Took it out.
But then we also took out 4 million, so you're kind of in that, you see the balancing game back and forth. So then in 7/31/21, expenditures were, or revenues were 31.9, and then expenditures were 28.4. Excess revenues over expenditures is when we received the settlement from the roofs. So that was put back in. So our current fund balance is at 14 million.
Or it could be.
Could be.
It would have
so,
been at
yeah.
July the 31st if
Yeah.
that was our year.
We may be a little lower than that.
It may be a little different.
We've had a few more expenditures, so, but then if you look at this last year, the things that we spent on, that came out of it, we just fixed the turf, the tennis courts, and the track. So that was, actually 966,000. Technology software, 48.5. Upgrades of technology, that's basically, I guess that's all the 48.5 right there on the right-hand side, Jimmy?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. Our athletic headsets were not functioning. I know that looks like a lot, but that's less than what the quotes that we were getting. So that's, we get one of the same group that did all this and the PAC renovations, so they've been working for us, and they did a good job for us. They cut the price down. Security upgrades, you know about the cameras at the high school and the junior high school, and we had the, is that the door locking systems also, Jimmy?
No, these were strictly
That's
just cameras.
Yeah, and then the doors, I don't see the door system on here, but.
Well, we didn't do a budget amendment for it, and
Okay.
I haven't got,
Okay.
we'll
all
get
right.
to that on the next page.
All right, I'm with you.
But I haven't got that for you.
And then the E-rate project, that's the same one that we were talking about earlier, this is getting bumped from year to year. And then, so roughly, you can see with the settlement, we should be somewhere around 13, 14, depending, you know.
Where's the settlement amount?
It's included in the 31,949,000.
It's included up top of the 31, that's where the excess revenues came from,
Okay.
up top.
I mean, we spend about $250,000 a month on operating costs, $2 million on payroll, and we got about $1 million coming in from the state, so he's correct, it'll probably be somewhere around 13 million.
All right. And then these projects on this page are what we've taken out of projects that we've addressed by taking out of just the general fund, not fund balance, just the general funds, maintenance and operations. So when I got here, we did not have a, we don't have a dedicated academy, whatever we want to call it, for recovering our student dropouts. And our dropout rate was affecting our accountability. And one of the things that I saw that we really needed was to basically have a dedicated DAP area, but also have an environment where our students could be successful, and that became Wildcat Success Center. So we moved those students into a portable. We had to move the 2 dilapidating portables off of the junior high school. We moved them up to central office, and they are behind central office, and we remodeled, and so you're seeing where a lot of that is. We also had an AC unit. We had sanded the floor and repainted the floor, resurfaced the floor. Well, then the floor, the dust and everything collected up in the AC units, and then we had a leak off the AC unit. So then we had to fix the floor, the gym floor, to the tune of $35,000. And that was kind of a rushed emergency job, so. Then we had to restore the turf. I've talked numerous times when I got here, the junior high football field looked and felt like this, and I did not want kids playing on that, so we moved the kids up here to the turf for 1 year, but as we were trying to recover it, we were doing really good with that recovery project until the freeze hit, the snowmageddon hit, and then We still have some patches that aren't quite filled in, but it was looking very good. We also found out, did some analysis of the water. We found out the water had too much sodium in it, okay? So it was killing off the grass, and it wasn't growing the way it needed to grow. So it took special fertilizers and all that to kind of recover it. So that's where you see the restored turf field. So Multichem, it's been a process of trying to recover that turf and investment to get it back to where it needs to be. So that our kids actually have an environment to play on that's suitable. Commercial equipment, CTE, kitchen, we didn't have a CTE program. We didn't have a culinary arts program. And this is an investment in bringing that program into play. And that's been a very successful program for our kids. And one of the reasons why, when I looked at our CTE programs, a lot of it was high tech and appealed to only students that were really, good with audio visual, computers, computer maintenance. And we were missing the boat with a lot of our students that weren't going to be able to do those things. So culinary arts brought in another venue for our students, and now we've added on auto mechanics, and we're welding. So we're bringing in other programs to sit there and facilitate that. But there was an investment in equipment to be able to do that. And then we moved, like I said, the storage building at the junior high, which was kind of out in the field by itself, and we kind of tucked it back around the other portables and stuff. So we have better storage and got it moved around. Pitch counter for the baseball field, that was a requirement that came out with UIL, was to basically have a way to keep count of the pitches because too many kids' arms were getting hurt, and so that was an investment to sit there of safety for students. And then we had to restore the turf at the junior high again, Multichem, and re-insulate the gym at Arthur. The insulation was falling down, and it was really thin, and basically it's now spray foamed, and it's a much more heavy-duty building. Maintenance for the turf of the fields, once again, the turf fields, they were not, I guess, being maintained the way that they needed to. We had a company come in and they basically pulled everything out, vacuumed everything out, all the pebbles, and they would pick up the metal and all the stuff that was in it that wasn't supposed to be in there, fluff the stuff back up. We were trying to prolong the longevity of our turf, and it works for a little while, but as we saw, we were repairing the turf out here on the football field far too many times to sit there and be able to keep it. That's why we went with the new turf.
Do we have one of those machines, the fluff turf?
We do now. We had one, but we're gonna now we're gonna have a routine maintenance on it.
Can we talk about that real quick?
Sure.
What they give us, is basically for maintenance, they give us, and we got a new one with this new turf that fluffs it, and the coaches run it on there on a regular basis. But what, Cat Turf does is come in and they do a deep clean sanitation where they pull out, I don't know how all these bobby pins end up in turf, but they do. And there's bobby pins, there's cleat stuff, and they pull all that out of there and sanitize it and maintain it. That had never been done on any of our fields at that point. And they also, because of the concussion protocols, they do it's called a G-force. And y'all saw that when we made that decision, the G-force of the impact. And they test areas to see where that G-force is at. Just FYI, the indoor's gonna be next. We're getting right there, but anyways, but that's what it is. It's a deep clean, and it's maintaining, and they put stuff back into it where we're not putting any more, for lack of a better term, pebbly filler back in there. And now we're gonna be doing that on a yearly basis.
All right. And this is not an exhaustive list. I mean, he's still digging for other things to kind of bring through.
These were the things
We have
that I
touched
found
a lot of
easily.
different areas
There's
in
a whole
short
lot
period of
more
time,
other stuff
so.
that I'm having to dig for.
Gotta do the maintenance.
I have a couple questions.
Any questions for
Are we
Liz,
up to
yeah?
questions again? These are just some general questions. I know that we did our public notice and the meeting will be August 26th for the public. Will this information be repeated for the public? Will they get copies of this, or what will be the public hearing?
I mean, I've done this 20-something years now. I've never had anybody show up at the public hearing.
Well, see, we-
The notice is, one, we just got a thing today, we have to post it on the
Right.
Tarrant County website, so this truth and taxation form that you're seeing right
No,
here.
no, no,
and
no,
that's
that was the computation to get to these numbers.
All right. So anyway, we have to post something on
Right.
on the website. We have to post a notice, and so that's already been posted. So,
And there'll
So-
be a script that you have to read that basically says this increases taxes on every taxpayer by X amount.
Okay.
You have to put it, it's a public statement of that.
So these documents like this that we reviewed today, is there any reason why, because I've sat on that side before, and we do have some guests in the audience who listen to everything, but were not privy to any of the documents and weren't able to follow along. And like I said, I've sat there. So even though you're saying that a lot of people don't come and may not come to the 26th, we've got some people here today.
Okay.
So there may be people that come on the 26th. So what is going to be afforded to them regarding this information and our documents like this, just for this budget and also in the future, not available for them to take when they do show up?
Contact me.
Okay.
It's all public records.
Can we get a copy? Is it gonna be online? Just kinda, a lot of the numbers, you know, it's educational, so I don't know if it's public or not.
I mean, everything is public records, so.
we can post it, I mean,
I would
The
say
summary
to
should
post
be
this.
online.
yeah, we can put the
If-
summary online
yeah.
and the tax.
This should be online.
This would be a good one.
This has to be
because
online.
This one has to be?
This has to be published. The one that we actually read.
That's
in
That's
your
the
public.
one we published in the paper.
Yeah.
We're
Okay,
gonna also
this
put
one?
it on our website.
Okay, I think this is a good one, because it shows, this is what we did last year, this is what we're proposing to do this year. And then if they come, if someone does show up, then they have a specific question about, they may not understand, what are we spending $17,000 for instruction for? Well, then, they have some numbers to know that we're spending money where it's supposed to be spent.
And the reality is after the budget is adopted, we have, by law, have to post it. So all of our budgets for year after year after year are posted on the website. So that's law.
But I think the intent of the public notice is so that on the upfront, if there's public comments or questions, not just that we have informed them after the fact, right?
Right. Yeah, this one is a good one.
Yeah, so you're saying that yes, we can. So on the 26th, these documents could be made available for anybody who does decide to show up. Okay. My
Well,
second,
no, I thought they were gonna publish it before then,
let's
so
put it
they
on our
can
website.
come.
We will put it on our website.
Yeah.
and
We
I'll
put it on our
have
website.
copies as
Right.
well.
Okay, copies and published.
And then my
I believe we
second,
put it on our website last year, you know?
Okay,
I mean, so,
perfect.
Yeah, I mean,
Perfect.
it's not like we haven't put it out there. I mean,
perfect. And then my second question is, generally, public comment has to be at the beginning of the meeting. But if we're going to have the budget, are we going to modify public comment so they can
It's a
hear?
public hearing is, that's what it's for.
Public hearing, it's not, it'll be a separate
It's a
line
separate
item.
part of
Okay.
it.
Okay,
I mean, in our agenda.
okay, perfect. So people can comment and question, okay, versus the normal board procedures.
Yes,
Okay, gotcha. Okay, perfect, thank you.
all right. Any other questions? All right, that's all the items on our agenda. Our next meeting is scheduled for the 26th.
6,
And we'll,
6 o'clock, 7 o'clock.
well,
7.
our regular meeting is at 7, excuse me, but it may be a long meeting, so be prepared for it. There's a lot to cover, a lot to do. Before you leave, I have copies of all of the superintendent goals and requests. I'll give each of you a copy set of what I've received, so you see what we've gotten so far. And
Perfect,
if you want to refine, mark up, add to,
okay.
just get it to me in time so we can get it, because we'll have that discussion coming up.
Okay. And thank you, because
Yes,
that was
thank you.
an awesome
Being
presentation.
very
Thank you.
patient and answering all questions.
Got a question in the
Mr. Adams.
So I love how pushing the budget, good job with that, you went through a lot of numbers, so this is my first meeting, so excellent job. I missed the first few minutes, so I apologize for being late, taking care of the kids at home. So what's our KISD latest position on masks for COVID and tracking of
Again-
cases and all that stuff? I know it's a different meeting, but.
Well, again, even at this meeting, we can't, unless it's a posted item for discussion, we can't discuss that. We can't go back and forth and have that conversation because we didn't post the discussion. So, I mean, you know, before the next meeting, I guess there'll be some more refinement depending on what's happening, but we really can't discuss it because we'll be violating what's been posted for the meeting. Pardon?
You still,
The rules.
it's still against the rules.
How can we get that on the meeting next time, I guess? That's our question.
Okay.
Have it a line item that can be discussed, I guess.
We can add an item to have discussion about masks. I mean, we can have that
I
again.
mean, masks is debatable, but tracking COVID cases in school is what's.
And again,
scaring me a little bit.
again, we take the comments that we hear and we try to make adjustments with those. So maybe between now and then, you'll see whether those issues are gonna come back in a way that you can observe them, if that's what you're looking for. I'll have the conversation with it, but we as a group can't have a conversation, discussion about what you presented because it wasn't on the agenda for tonight.
Right, so how do we get it on the agenda for next time?
Again,
How does that happen?
well, again, we heard your comments tonight. We'll have a discussion with the superintendent about what we add to our meetings based on what we got to address.
Okay, so it doesn't, it's just up to y'all if you
Yes.
add it or
Yes.
not.
The
Yes.
bottom line to your
That's what I was
question is
looking
yes.
for.
Yes.
I didn't know
The
if you
board
did.
is the group, the entity that would have to ask for something to be on the agenda.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay.
But again, we take the comments that we hear and we
Right.
try to see what we can address from those comments, maybe not necessarily requiring a bunch of board action. So again, again, we
The
heard what you had to
process.
say, I understand that, you know, and we've all been inundated with lots of emails and messages, believe me.
Yeah. You know, my son is a special needs kid, and it's just hard to even explain to him what is COVID and how can, you know, try to put him at home, all that stuff, so.
And
We're gonna adjourn.
I mean, yeah, I don't mean to, I mean, I just really can't talk.
So y'all aren't adjourned yet, right?
No.
We all stick around after the adjournment where we can talk to y'all in a non-formal setting.
You can talk to any board member who wants to have a conversation, but
Separately.
again,
Right.
if 2 or 3 are sitting there talking with you, it starts to become board action.
Comes to board.
Right.
So we have to be careful with that.
Okay, but as of right now, we're still in.
Right now, we haven't adjourned yet.
So we can't discuss that, but after you adjourn,
Yes.
we can speak to you one-on-one.
Yes.
Right? Any other items up for discussion?
No.
Then at 8:18, we are adjourned. Thank you all for your participation.